On the surface, it looked like one of the greatest triumphs of Queen Camilla's royal life. The sun shone over Buckingham Palace, military tradition unfolded with flawless precision, and centuries of royal ceremony blended together in a display of power, continuity, and prestige. Standing before the Grenadier Guards, wearing symbols deeply connected to royal history, Camilla appeared to embody everything she had spent decades fighting to achieve. To millions watching around the world, the message seemed unmistakable. After years of controversy, criticism, and public resistance, she had finally reached the very center of the institution that once appeared determined to keep her at its edges. Yet according to many royal commentators, the most important part of that day was not what people saw. It was what they did not see. Because while the ceremony projected confidence and authority, some observers believe it also revealed something far more significant: the quiet emergence of a future monarchy already beginning to eclipse the present one. According to many analysts, this is what makes the story so fascinating. The event itself was not controversial. The ceremony proceeded exactly as planned. The military honor tradition. The palace projected stability, and Camilla carried out her responsibilities with the professionalism expected of a queen. Yet despite all of this, conversations surrounding the event quickly began focusing elsewhere. Not on the ceremony, not on the uniforms, not even on Camilla herself. Instead, attention once again shifted toward Prince William and Catherine. According to many royal observers, this recurring pattern has become increasingly difficult to ignore. No matter how significant a royal event may be, public attention frequently gravitates toward the Prince and Princess of Wales. Supporters of the narrative argue that this reflects a deeper reality taking shape inside the monarchy. While Charles and Camilla represent the current reign, William and Catherine increasingly represent the future. Their influence extends beyond official titles because they command something that cannot easily be created through ceremony or protocol alone: public enthusiasm. This distinction lies at the heart of the story. Camilla possesses institutional authority. She occupies one of the highest positions within the monarchy. She participates in state events. She represents the crown. And she carries responsibilities that place her at the center of national life. Yet according to many commentators, authority and affection are not always the same thing. One can be granted by institutions, the other must be earned from the public. Supporters of the narrative argue that this difference has shaped much of Camilla's royal journey. For decades, she worked to transform public perception. Following years of intense scrutiny and criticism, she gradually established herself as a reliable and dedicated member of the royal family. Through patience, discipline, and service, she achieved something many observers once considered impossible. She became queen. Yet according to many analysts, even that remarkable achievement has not entirely erased the contrast between her position and the natural popularity enjoyed by William and Catherine. What makes the situation particularly interesting is that the future appears closer than ever. William's public profile continues expanding. Catherine remains one of the most admired figures in the monarchy, and discussions about the next royal era are becoming increasingly common among commentators, journalists, and royal watchers. Supporters of the narrative argue that this creates an unusual reality for Camilla. She has reached the summit of royal life, yet she occupies that position while public attention increasingly focuses on those who will eventually come after her. According to many royal commentators, this dynamic may explain why events like the Buckingham Palace ceremony generate such fascination. The occasion itself celebrated continuity, yet many observers viewed it through the lens of transition. They saw not only the present monarchy, but the future one waiting in the wings. And according to supporters of the narrative, that future was subtly visible everywhere. Not through official announcements, not through constitutional changes, but through something far more powerful: the growing perception that William and Catherine have already become the emotional center of the royal family, even while Charles and Camilla remain at its formal head. That perception, many observers argue, would soon transform a ceremonial victory into the beginning of a much larger conversation about legacy, succession, and the inevitable arrival of a new royal era. According to many royal commentators, the reason Queen Camilla's apparent triumph feels so complicated is because her journey to the top of the monarchy was unlike anything experienced by previous queens. Most royal consorts enter public life with goodwill, curiosity, and the advantage of beginning their royal careers while still relatively young. Camilla's path was completely different. For decades, she existed under the shadow of one of the most emotionally powerful stories in modern British history, a story involving the marriage of King Charles and Diana, Princess of Wales, a story that shaped public perceptions for an entire generation. According to many observers, this meant that Camilla was forced to fight a battle few public figures could have survived, let alone eventually win. Every public appearance was scrutinized, every photograph was analyzed, and every attempt to establish a role within the royal family faced resistance from people who viewed her through the lens of events that had occurred years earlier. Yet despite those obstacles, she remained determined to secure her place within the institution. According to supporters of the narrative, what followed was one of the most remarkable image transformations in modern royal history. Rather than attempting to force public acceptance, Camilla reportedly adopted a strategy based on patience, consistency, and service. Year after year, she carried out engagements, supported charitable causes, and maintained a disciplined public presence. There were no dramatic campaigns to reinvent her image overnight. Instead, there was a slow and deliberate effort to demonstrate reliability. Many royal analysts argue that this gradual approach proved effective because it allowed public opinion to evolve naturally rather than through pressure. Over time, hostility softened, criticism became less intense, and while Camilla never achieved universal popularity, she eventually reached a point where large portions of the public were willing to accept her role within the monarchy. The turning point, according to many commentators, arrived during the final years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. For years, uncertainty had surrounded Camilla's future status. Questions persisted regarding titles. Questions persisted regarding public acceptance. And questions persisted regarding how history would ultimately judge her role within the royal family. Then came the announcement that many observers viewed as transformational. Queen Elizabeth publicly expressed her wish that Camilla would be known as Queen Consort when Charles eventually became king. For supporters of Camilla, this represented validation after decades of struggle. For critics, it signaled the closing of a chapter they had hoped would never be written. But regardless of perspective, the announcement fundamentally changed the conversation. According to many analysts, once King Charles ascended the throne, Camilla finally achieved the objective she had spent years pursuing. She became queen. The position that once appeared unattainable was now reality. She participated in state occasions, represented the crown, and stood alongside the king during some of the most important moments of his reign. From the outside, the story looked complete. The woman who had endured extraordinary public criticism had ultimately prevailed. Yet according to supporters of the narrative, this apparent victory contained an unexpected complication. Because unlike Queen Elizabeth, who ascended the throne at a relatively young age and enjoyed decades to shape her legacy, Camilla reached the summit of royal life at a much later stage. Time suddenly became a factor. The future became impossible to ignore, and every major public appearance carried a different meaning. According to many observers, this reality creates a unique challenge for Camilla. She occupies one of the highest positions in the monarchy, yet she does so while standing between two powerful forces. Behind her lies a controversial past that many people still remember. Ahead of her stands a future increasingly associated with Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. Supporters of the narrative argue that this creates a sense of impermanence surrounding even her greatest achievements. Every ceremony celebrates her current role, yet simultaneously reminds observers that a new era is already approaching. This is why many commentators found the Buckingham Palace ceremony so fascinating. On the surface, it represented validation, it represented recognition, and it represented the culmination of decades of persistence. Yet beneath that symbolism lay another reality. The monarchy never stands still. Generations change, roles evolve, and public attention gradually shifts toward the future. According to many royal observers, that future increasingly revolves around William and Catherine. Their popularity continues attracting global interest. Their public appearances dominate headlines, and discussions surrounding the next phase of royal history often focus on them rather than the current occupants of the throne. Supporters of the narrative therefore argue that Camilla's greatest victory may also contain the seeds of her greatest challenge. After spending decades fighting to secure her place at the center of the monarchy, She now finds herself watching public attention slowly move toward those who will eventually inherit it. And according to many commentators, that shift would become even more visible as William and Catherine's influence continued growing while preparations for the monarchy's next era quietly accelerated behind the scenes. According to many royal commentators, the next phase of the narrative centers on a reality that Queen Camilla reportedly understands better than almost anyone else inside royal circles. While she currently occupies one of the most visible and prestigious positions within the monarchy, public attention is increasingly gravitating toward the future rather than the present. Supporters of the narrative argue that this shift has become impossible to ignore because it appears almost everywhere. It appears in media coverage. It appears in public polling. It appears in international headlines. And perhaps most importantly, it appears in the extraordinary level of fascination surrounding Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. According to many observers, this growing attention is not simply the result of their titles. It reflects a broader perception that they already embody the monarchy's next chapter, even while King Charles and Queen Camilla remain firmly in place. What makes this development especially significant is the contrast between the types of influence involved. Camilla possesses formal authority through her position as queen. Her role is defined by constitutional recognition, institutional responsibility, and ceremonial importance. William and Catherine, by contrast, are often portrayed as possessing a different kind of influence entirely. Their power comes not from the offices they currently hold, but from public enthusiasm surrounding what they represent. According to many royal analysts, this distinction matters because institutions can grant titles, appointments, and ceremonial responsibilities, but they cannot manufacture genuine public affection. Supporters of the narrative argue that William and Catherine benefit from a level of emotional connection with the public that emerges naturally rather than through official structures. And this reality allegedly creates a challenge for anyone attempting to remain at the center of public attention while they continue rising. According to many commentators, Catherine occupies a particularly important role within this dynamic because she has become one of the monarchy's most admired figures. Whether attending charitable engagements, representing the crown abroad, or simply appearing at public events, she consistently generates extraordinary interest. Cameras follow her movements. Newspapers analyze her appearances. Social media discussions often revolve around her activities for days. Supporters of the narrative argue that this level of attention cannot easily be replicated because it stems from a combination of personal popularity, public trust, and years of careful public service. As a result, every time Catherine returns to the spotlight following periods away from public duties, the contrast between her popularity and that of other royal figures becomes increasingly noticeable. This is where many observers believe the story becomes emotionally complex. Camilla spent decades fighting for acceptance, decades overcoming criticism, decades working to secure legitimacy. And after all that effort, she finally reached the highest position available to her. Yet according to supporters of a narrative, she reached that position at precisely the moment when public attention was already beginning to migrate toward the next generation. That reality does not diminish her achievement, but it changes the context in which that achievement is viewed. According to many royal commentators, William's growing influence contributes even further to this perception. Unlike previous heirs who sometimes appear distant from the daily operation of the monarchy, William increasingly occupies a visible leadership role. He represents Britain internationally. He undertakes major initiatives. He addresses issues extending far beyond ceremonial obligations. Supporters argue that these activities demonstrate preparation for future kingship, while critics caution against interpreting routine responsibilities as evidence of immediate power shifts. Nevertheless, the perception continues spreading that William is gradually becoming one of the institution's most important figures long before he formally inherits the crown. Many observers point to this perception when discussing the Buckingham Palace ceremony. The event celebrated Camilla's current position. Yet conversations afterward frequently return to William and Catherine, not because they dominated the ceremony itself, but because they dominate discussions about the future. Supporters of the narrative argue that this pattern reveals something profound about the monarchy's current moment. Britain is simultaneously experiencing two royal eras at once. One currently governs. The other is already capturing public imagination. According to many royal commentators, this reality may explain why events that appear straightforward on the surface often generate deeper speculation beneath. Every ceremony involving Camilla is viewed not only as a reflection of her present role, but also as a reminder that time continues moving forward. Every appearance by William and Catherine reinforces expectations surrounding the future. And every discussion about the monarchy increasingly involves questions about succession, legacy, and transition. Supporters of the narrative therefore argue that the ceremony at Buckingham Palace represented more than a successful royal engagement. It symbolized a moment when the present monarchy appeared powerful and secure while simultaneously revealing just how strongly public attention has already begun shifting toward the generation waiting to inherit it. And according to many observers, that growing shift would soon raise even larger questions about Camilla's legacy, her long-term place in royal history, and what happens when William and Catherine finally become the defining faces of the institution. According to many royal commentators, the most intriguing aspect of the narrative emerges when attention shifts away from titles and ceremonies and focuses instead on legacy. Power inside the monarchy has always been temporary. Kings reign, queens reign, generations rise and fall. Yet what ultimately determines how history remembers a royal figure is not the office they held but the impression they leave behind. Supporters of the narrative argue that this reality may be the source of Queen Camilla's greatest challenge, because while she succeeded in achieving a position many people once believed impossible, she now faces the far more difficult task of defining how that achievement will be remembered once a new generation takes center stage. According to many observers, this is where the growing prominence of Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, becomes impossible to ignore. Supporters of the narrative argue that William's influence is no longer measured simply by his constitutional position as heir to the throne. Instead, it is increasingly measured by the expectations people attach to his future reign. Around the world, governments, diplomats, journalists, and royal analysts are already discussing what the monarchy may look like under his leadership. They debate his priorities, they speculate about his reforms, and they analyze every major decision for clues about the institution he may eventually inherit. According to many commentators, this creates a fascinating situation because William's future influence is already affecting perceptions of the present monarchy even before any formal transition has occurred. What makes the situation even more significant is Catherine's role within that future vision. According to many observers, Catherine possesses something that cannot easily be created through protocol or constitutional authority. She possesses widespread public affection. Her appearances generate enormous attention. Her charitable work receives extensive coverage, and her ability to connect with audiences often extends beyond traditional royal supporters. Supporters of the narrative argue that this popularity gives Catherine a unique advantage because it creates anticipation for the future rather than merely appreciation for the present. As a result, discussions about the next royal era frequently place her at the center. This dynamic allegedly creates a difficult reality for Camilla. Throughout her royal journey, much of her effort focused on earning acceptance. She worked to overcome skepticism. She worked to establish legitimacy. And she worked to demonstrate commitment to public service. According to many analysts, those efforts ultimately succeeded to a remarkable degree. Yet supporters of the narrative argue that acceptance and affection remain fundamentally different forms of public support. Acceptance can be achieved through consistency and perseverance. Affection often develops naturally and unpredictably. This distinction, they claim, explains why comparisons between Camilla and Catherine continue appearing despite the two women occupying very different positions within the monarchy. According to many royal commentators, another factor contributing to this perception is the emergence of younger members of the royal family who increasingly symbolize continuity and renewal. Every generation introduces new faces, new priorities, and new expectations. The monarchy survives precisely because it adapts while preserving its core identity. Supporters of the narrative argue that this process is already underway. Public attention is gradually expanding beyond the current reign and toward the individuals who will define the institution's future decades. As that transition continues, Camilla allegedly faces the challenge of maintaining relevance within a narrative increasingly focused on what comes next. Many observers point to the Buckingham Palace ceremony as an example of this phenomenon. The event itself celebrated Camilla's current role and highlighted her place within the existing structure of the monarchy. Yet much of the subsequent discussion focused not on the ceremony's details, but on broader questions about succession, legacy, and the next generation. According to supporters of the narrative, this reaction revealed something important. It suggested that many people no longer view royal events solely through the lens of the present. Instead, they interpret them as part of a larger story leading toward the eventual reign of William and Catherine. This perception is what gives the title its emotional power. The supposed signal is not a decree, not a public confrontation, and not an official announcement. Rather, supporters of the narrative argue that it is the growing realization that public attention is already beginning to migrate toward the future monarchy. A future in which William and Catherine occupy the central roles. A future in which new priorities emerge. And a future in which the achievements of the current generation are viewed through a historical lens rather than an immediate one. According to many commentators, this may be the challenge that concerns Camilla most. Not the loss of formal authority, because every royal role eventually passes to someone else. Not even the arrival of a new reign, because succession is built into the monarchy's very structure. Instead, the challenge lies in determining how history will remember her once the spotlight inevitably shifts elsewhere. And according to supporters of the narrative, that question grows more significant with every appearance, every ceremony, and every reminder that the era of William and Catherine appears closer than ever before. According to many royal commentators, the final chapter of this story is not really about a single ceremony at Buckingham Palace, nor is it about one public appearance, one photograph, or one symbolic moment. Instead, supporters of the narrative argue that it is about something far larger, the unavoidable reality that every royal era eventually gives way to another. Throughout history, monarchies have survived because they continually balance continuity with change. One generation serves, another prepares. One era reaches its peak while the next quietly waits in the background. According to many observers, the Buckingham Palace ceremony appeared to capture that transition in real time. On the surface, it celebrated Queen Camilla's position at the center of the monarchy. Yet beneath the pageantry and tradition, many commentators believe they were witnessing something else entirely, the gradual emergence of a future already beginning to command public attention. According to supporters of the narrative, this is why the event generated such intense discussion after it ended. The ceremony itself was successful. Camilla fulfilled her role. The palace projected stability, and the institution demonstrated the continuity that has defined it for centuries. Yet despite all of those achievements, conversations repeatedly returned to the same subject. The future. More specifically, the future represented by Prince William and Catherine. According to many royal analysts, this shift reflects a broader reality shaping public perceptions of the monarchy today. While King Charles and Queen Camilla remain the official faces of the current reign, William and Catherine increasingly dominate discussions about what comes next. Their influence extends beyond constitutional status because they have become symbols of renewal, continuity, and long-term stability. Supporters of the narrative argue that this growing fascination creates an unusual situation in which the future monarchy often attracts as much attention as the present one. For Camilla, according to many observers, this reality may carry both satisfaction and uncertainty. Satisfaction because she achieved what once seemed impossible. She secured acceptance. She earned recognition. And she ultimately became queen. Few public figures have experienced such a dramatic transformation of public perception. Yet uncertainty remains because no royal legacy is measured solely by the position someone reaches. It is also measured by what follows afterward, how history remembers them, how future generations view their contribution, and where they ultimately fit within the larger story of the monarchy. Supporters of the narrative frequently point out that Camilla's legacy is already more secure than many critics once predicted. She successfully navigated decades of controversy, adapted to changing public expectations, and established herself as a reliable working member of the royal family. Whether people admire her or remain skeptical of her journey, few deny that she demonstrated resilience. According to many commentators, that achievement alone ensures her place within modern royal history. At the same time, William's growing prominence continues influencing how people view the institution's future. Every major appearance strengthens perceptions of his readiness. Every public engagement reinforces expectations surrounding his eventual reign. And every discussion about royal modernization tends to place him near the center. According to supporters of the narrative, this is the true meaning behind the supposed signal that captured so much attention. Not an official declaration, not a confrontation, and not a sudden transfer of authority. Rather, a growing public recognition that the next chapter of royal history is approaching faster than many people expected. For many royal observers, the Buckingham Palace ceremony therefore became symbolic in an unexpected way. It showcased the strength of the present monarchy, while simultaneously highlighting the anticipation surrounding the future one. It celebrated Camilla's accomplishments while reminding audiences that William and Catherine remain waiting in the wings. And according to supporters of the narrative, it demonstrated how difficult it can be for any reigning generation to compete with the public's fascination for what comes next. Ultimately, many commentators believe the story says less about conflict and more about transition. Camilla's journey represented perseverance. Charles's reign represents continuity. William and Catherine represent the future. And the monarchy itself continues moving forward, adapting to new circumstances while preserving traditions that stretch back centuries. According to many observers, that process is already underway, whether people recognize it or not. And that may be why the ceremony resonated so strongly with royal audiences around the world. Because beneath the uniforms, the traditions, and the symbolism, many believe they were witnessing the closing stages of one royal chapter and the quiet opening pages of another. What do you think? Has public attention already shifted toward Prince William and Catherine, or do you believe King Charles and Queen Camilla will continue defining the monarchy for many years to come? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this remains one of the most fascinating debates in royal circles today. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest coverage of Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, Queen Camilla, and King Charles III. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.